Welcome to Self-Evident Truth with the Grumpy Old Vet, episode number 14. I want to talk about totalitarianism, a centralized government that forces the people with their power to be subservient to the government. I think that's kind of what we have. I think that's what this regime in the federal government is a totalitarian regime. I mean, we've seen all the attempts that they've done to try to shut down free speech in this country. We've seen the mainstream media being used as propaganda, as a propaganda machine. We've seen that our social media through 2020 has been being controlled by FBI operatives and CIA operatives to push a certain ideology, this woke ideology, to push it to push a political ideology, um, to cover up truth, to cover up justice, to make you think certain things that simply isn't the whole truth. We saw it with the the in 2020 with the virus. We've seen it. Everything that they said wasn't true, and those of us that said, "Wait a minute, that's not true," we were canceled and we were uh, beaten up on, metaphorically, verbally. And they tried to cancel us because they didn't like our free speech. They didn't like what we had to say. Um, we've seen it with the January 6th. They weren't telling us the truth. A lot of us said that were there said, no, what the news media is pushing is not the whole truth. And we knew it wasn't the whole truth. And now it's starting to come out that it wasn't the whole truth. Tucker Carlson played a lot of those videos and cost him his job. Interviewed the chief of the DC police, and that cost him his job. Of course, they never played that video because that video was going to say exactly what we said on January 7th. We've seen them try to control the narrative. We've seen them look, come on. Everybody knows Biden didn't get 81 million votes. We all know it. Or we suspected it. It's not looking very plausible that he got 81 million votes. And so, I thought we should have just had an investigation, no different than, the $40 million we spent investigating Russia, which we knew was wrong. A false warrant from a FISA court based on a false dossier that was paid for by the Clintons and under Obama, and he knew that they were tapping and listening into the other political party, the other side, his political opponents, their political opponents. Now, in during Nixon's time in Watergate, we said, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible," and we went after him, but we haven't gone after this one, and this is 100 times worse than Watergate, but yet federal law enforcement doesn't want to do anything about it. They act like it was no big deal. Well, it's a big deal. It was a big deal in Watergate, and it's a big deal now. So we're starting to see this centralized government that has power, that wants to maintain power, and the way they maintain power is to control speech. Because if they can control speech, they can control thinking, and that's what they want to do. So, let's look at some of the things that have been going on. Let's look at Bud Light. What happened to Bud Light? They pushed a woke ideology because they were going for an ESG score. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, this ESG score. See, Bud Light gambled. There's two large corporations that are the largest corporate donors into these businesses, and that's Vanguard and BlackRock. And at the last World Economic Summit, I believe it was the CEO of Vanguard that said, well, sometimes you have to force behaviors. Does that sound like what our founding fathers wanted for us? Forced behavior? Is that the definition of liberty? Don't think so. It's not in the definition of liberty I have. It's not in the principles that I've read in the Federalist Papers or in any of the founding documents. But that's what he said. So how are they forcing behaviors? Well, they're forcing behaviors through economics, through money. So these companies have to prove how woke they are to get a high ESG score. And the higher their ESG score is, then the more their corporate donors will give to them. Sounds a lot like politics, doesn't it? Corporate donors. So if they prove themselves woke enough, then they'll get these large investments from Vanguard, BlackRock. Now, Bud Light, what they did was gambled. They decided they would do this program and show how woke they were. And they knew they were going to lose some customers. But they figured what they lost, they would gain in that ESG score, and the corporate donors would give to them. So, you lose a little on one end, gain more on the other, and it was going to be all right. But this organic boycott that happened of the people standing up and finally saying, no, it's enough. We've had enough. So they lost billions of dollars. They lost more than what their corporate donors are going to give them. And they've lost market share and customers that they'll never get back. Target did the same thing, went down that same rabbit hole. Look what happened to them. So let's look at these companies that are doing this. Disney, Disney's lost $900 million on their last 8 movies. $900 million. See, trying to force these behaviors, especially on Americans, doesn't go real well. We're fiercely independent. It's in our blood. It comes from our founding. We don't like to be controlled. We don't like to be enslaved. Now, some do, but I'm talking in general terms. I think mostly people don't want to be controlled. They want to make their own decisions. They want to live with life, liberty, and their pursuit of happiness. But a totalitarian regime doesn't like that. That's dangerous. Now, another thing about totalitarian regimes is they don't particularly like science. Now, this climate culture, this has become its own religion in which they only give their narrative of the science. And there's many, many different opinions on this. But of course, you never see the ones that they don't like. So they want to control not only speech, but thought. And they call it science. You remember 2020? Wear the mask, follow the science. Well, I was following the science, the medical science, not the political science. And we all know now, it's all coming out, that it was all political science. It wasn't medical science. All of this stuff is coming out. They lied to us, intentionally lied to us, and they got the corporate media to push those lies. And anybody that had a different opinion or spoke differently was canceled by FBI and CIA operatives within social media. So I think it's safe to say that this administration in Washington, D.C. is totalitarian, and they'll do anything. Totalitarian cronies will do anything to keep power, anything. And typically what they'll do is they'll use the power of their position and the power of law enforcement to keep their power or or the courts to keep their power. And look what's going on. We see what's going on. Every time Trump gets a bogus indictment for something ridiculous, which they're trying to keep him from being a viable candidate because they're afraid. And so as soon as that happens, what happens is poll numbers go up. Why? Because Americans aren't stupid. Because Americans are fiercely independent. Because Americans like to think for themselves. They don't like people telling them what they need to think. We like to be the masters of our own destinies. So this is kind of backfiring for them. I mean, let's look at this last country music singer. He come out with a song, and they went after him to try to cancel him. And now on iTunes, he's top of the list. He's selling out every venue he goes to. Why? Because Biden didn't get 81 million votes. Okay. So they had something that Fauci predicted, oddly enough, and talked about in 2017 that there was going to be a pandemic in the middle of Trump's first term. And by golly, it happened just like he said. But most people didn't pay attention. Of course, the news media didn't publicize that speech a lot, but it's out there. So this was planned, and it was planned to take power. And now that it looks like Trump is going to run again, and he's going to run against whoever they come up with, the totalitarians are afraid. And this is why they're doing everything they can to destroy him as a viable candidate. Well, was Trump a great person? Nope, he was just a person. Was he a constitutionalist? Not even close. Was he a conservative? Not by the definition of conservatism. But see, they hated him in Washington, D.C. for what he's not. You see, he's not a communist. He's not a socialist. He loves capitalism and he loves this country. Two things that totalitarians don't necessarily like. Now, they like capitalism for themselves, but they want socialism for you. See, we've got one side practicing National Socialism, and we've got the other side practicing international socialism. Why do you think they gave Trump such a hard time about the 8.5 billion he wanted to spend on a wall on our southern border, but yet they've given $75 billion to Ukraine to protect their borders? Come on. It doesn't take a PhD to figure this out. They're doing whatever they can to get control, and they'll do anything to keep that control. They're turning our court systems into kangaroo courts, and they're turning our country into a banana republic. That's on the national, that's on the federal stage. Let's look at the state stage. Well, by golly, we got pretty much the same thing. We've got very much the same thing with Mein Führer, Wretched Gretchen, and Dana Nessel. Look at what they're doing in the state. They're going after 16 Republican electors that put their name on a list, duly elected, put their name on a list to petition the state legislature for an investigation to see whether, in fact, Biden should get all 16 of our electoral college votes. This isn't the first time this has been done. It happened in Florida in 2000. It's happened in a couple other places. The difference is this totalitarian government, this woke ideology, will do whatever it needs to do to keep power. See, power is the drug that they're after. They don't want to be your servants. They want to be your rulers. That's the big difference, right? So they're using the power of the law. They're using the courts. They're using anything they can, and they're bastardizing all of it to keep power. Well, let's look what's going on in Hillsdale. See, it's not just the federal, it's not just the state. It's happening right here. It's happening right here in your own home county, in your own little republic. See, we're a compound republic. Madison tells us that in 51. And a Republican form of government that's guaranteed to us by Article 4 of the Constitution. A republic, the hallmark of a republic is representative government. Now in 2020, the 7th congressional district that I was in then, now it's the 5th, overwhelmingly voted for Trump. But oddly, our electoral college vote went to Biden. Well, then the 7th congressional district wasn't represented. If we weren't represented as a republic, because we are that small republic. See, republics only work on small areas. They don't work on areas as big as a state. That comes from Montesquieu, from the spirit of the laws. So each republic was supposed to be represented for the state to guarantee us that Republican form of government that is in Article 4 of the Constitution. They failed. They didn't do it. They failed miserably. So Hillsdale's a little republic of its own. And it has totalitarianism here. Yep. We've got people that are in power that'll do anything to keep that power. So when the grassroots, the America First people, stood up, that scared them. That scared them because they're so used to controlling the power. They're so used to controlling people that it scares them. So they'll do anything to keep that power. Anything. Like, they'll go after Kelly Mapes and Joe Hendy for free speech, for political speech. They'll violate the law, like Marty Cass did, to take over the party so that they could control who gets elected, so that they could control the power. That's what this was all about. Marty Cass violated what started the whole thing, dropped us from 133 electors down to 100 with really no cause, and couldn't explain the cause. And then, which actually kind of proves that she was part of the plot from the beginning. And then they went around and they got all their staff during time that we're paying them, which is illegal. She even got the staff in her office to run for precinct delegates. And when we asked them, hey, we've got plenty of things to do. You're a precinct delegate. You want to come to a meeting? They said, we didn't sign up to go to meetings. And so they're asked, well, why'd you sign up? So we were told to sign up to hold a spot. Well, hold a spot for what? Hold a spot to make sure an America First person couldn't get that spot. Now, see, we don't mind competing on a level playing field. And they probably would have won even on that level playing field. But see, there's so much totalitarian that they had to fix it. They had to do whatever they needed to do. They had to commit election fraud to make sure that they tried to stay in power. And when it didn't work, then they violated the bylaws. And then when that didn't work, they went ahead and sued us. A huge amount of money to sue us. For what? Well, oddly, they're suing us with Warner, Lacrosse, and Judd. Oddly, those people donated to Fink's campaign. And if you read their corporate literature, they're trying to get a high ESG score because they're trying to show how woke they are. Does this sound like America First people, or does this sound like anti-Trump people? These are all anti-Trump people. They don't want America First. They don't want Hillsdale First. They just want power. They don't want to be your servants. They want to be your rulers. This is why they went after Kelly and Joe for political speech, First Amendment speech. And then when Mark Wiley, the chairman of the board of the county commissioners, was subpoenaed to court, he called the lawyer's office and said, "I'm not coming." And he didn't come. Does anybody remember an arrest warrant going out for him for failure to appear? Yeah, no, didn't happen. See, there's a two-tier legal system here. Even during the August convention, the sheriff was bragging how he was going to make a whole bunch of arrests. So he was threatening us with violence. So that's why we had a security team there. Because when you're threatened with violence, if you don't do something for your own security, then you're the stupid one. So we wanted peaceful. We didn't want violence. We wanted peaceful. So they're using law enforcement to go after us. There's a two-tiered legal system for sure. Lance Lashway had someone actually break into his house and threaten his wife. And when the sheriff's department was called, that person had left by then. And the reason why he left is because Lance and his wife both are armed, and he knew she was armed, so he left. And when Lance got with the sheriff and made the complaint, the sheriff's answer to him was, "Well, you've got guns, right?" So they didn't do anything because he's got guns. But yet somebody calls and threatens the sheriff. And Scott Hodshire is more than happy to bring Dana Nessel in to prosecute that person, try to put him away for 20 years. So do you see the two-tiered legal system? Doesn't Scott have a gun? So shouldn't the same explanation go to him? So we target people that we don't like. We target people when we don't like their speech. And we use law enforcement and the courts to go after them. That's totalitarianism. Because they're afraid of losing power. They don't want to be servants to the people. They want to be their rulers. Benjamin Franklin gave a speech in June of 1787 in which he said, "There's two things that rule the hearts of man, avarice and ambition, the love of money and the love of power." Of course, I'm paraphrasing here. He said either one will spur men into doing great things. But he said if you create positions that are both positions of power and profit, he said it won't be the gentle, peace-loving men of this country that will vie for those positions. He said it will be the bold and the violent that will thrust themselves into those positions to be your rulers. You know, in that Constitutional Convention, Ben was 81 years old. Everybody else was in their 30s and 40s. A lot of wisdom, A lot of wisdom in people who ride this rock around the sun. A lot of times. Ben had that wisdom. Pretty prophetic. He actually pretty much predicted where we would be in that speech. And here we are. But I don't think any of our founders thought that there would be a president that would actually advocate a ministry of truth or a ministry. Come on. Popular speech doesn't need to be protected, but unpopular speech does. And totalitarians don't like free speech. They don't like it in Hillsdale. They go after anybody that is in opposition to them. And we're seeing it in Hillsdale. It's a microcosm of what's happening in Lansing and what's happening in Washington, D.C. You've got the bold and the violent that have thrust themselves into those positions to be your rulers, not your servants. So, a little something to think about. Just an observation from a grumpy old vet. And, our founders predicted this. Benjamin Franklin said you have a republic if you can keep it. We didn't spend a lot of time keeping our republic. Now we got a banana republic with totalitarianism pushing down on us. This is why you're starting to see people stand up. This is why you're seeing Bud Light lose billions. This is why you're seeing Target lose billions. This is why you're seeing Disney lose millions of dollars on their woke movies. This is why you see a country music singer that sang a simple song about small towns, about how we operate in small towns, not here. And they've ascribed some of the most horrendous things to that song. If you listen to the lyrics, it doesn't say anything like what they're trying to push on the national media. So I think people not only are waking up, but they're starting to stand up and they're starting to speak up and they're starting to vote with their money. So look around you. The most important government and the most powerful government is your local government. We need to be more concerned there than with state government or with federal government. If you want to change what happens in Washington, D.C., and change what happens in Lansing, you have to take care of your local government. You have to make sure that your local government is operating transparently, and it's not. You have to make sure that your local government's not using their power to go after the people, and they are. This is why every one of the elected officials are suing me personally. Because they're scared to death of their power. They're scared to death of free speech. They're scared to death of transparency. Because they're scared to death that they can't keep power. And that's what they want. So, with that, I know I gave you a lot to think about. Just kind of take a look at it and see. See if what I'm saying is right or wrong. The decision is yours, ultimately. So, just take a look at it. And with that, I'd like to remind you to live, laugh, and love. Live every day to its fullest. Hug the people around you. You don't know how long you're on this earth. You don't know how long they're on this earth. Tell the people you love them every day. Hug them. Stay close to your family. Talk to your family. And with that, God bless America.